Alright, welcome back to another video. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fetch the guild from the Next.js application. In the last video, we implemented the route to actually fetch the Discord API for the individual guild. So now we're just going to fetch that endpoint from our Next app. So we're going to go into dashboard ID index.tsx, and we are going to need to use the get server side props function. So remember that this is an asynchronous function that you can export inside the page file, and Next will call this upon request for get server side props. And it takes in a single parameter, which is the context. So the type is get server side props context. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and call a function that we're going to implement inside our api.ts file. So it's going to be similar to fetch mutual guilds. So honestly, I'm not going to copy and paste it, but I'll just kind of like reuse a lot of the same code that we had here. So export const fetch guild. Okay, and it's going to take in a context. So I'm just going to rename it as ctx. And what we want to do is we first want to validate the cookies. So what the validate cookies does is it just pretty much checks to see if the user has the cookie available in the browser, and if they don't, then we're just going to return false. And then we check to see if it's truthy or falsy. And if it's falsy, that means that we're just going to redirect the user, because it just means that they're not authenticated. So I'm just going to copy and paste this whole thing over here. Okay. Because I don't want to rewrite all that stuff again, because it just does the same thing. Okay, all it does is just validates the cookie, and if the cookie actually does exist, then it'll just return an object which has the cookie property, and this is actually going to be passing as a header. Okay, so if the headers is not defined, if it's falsy, it's just going to redirect back to the home page. However, if the headers are defined, then this headers variable will be an object. The value will be an object, and we're going to pass it in when we call Axios. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and call Axios.get, and the type is just going to be a guild. Remember that this is not the actual fully typed out guild object, it's just actually a partial guild. Okay, but like I said, if you want to type annotate yourself with all the guilds, with all the guild properties, you can go ahead and do that. So the API URL will be /guilds. Now we need the ID, so we can actually grab the ID from context.query.id. And we'll pass in the headers. Okay, and let's go ahead and destructure the data property from the Axios response, and then we'll rename data as guild. Let's console log guild, and let's just return the props property. Okay, so if the call is successful, it's going to return props. Okay, and then we're gonna have to actually return the value of fetch guild inside get server side props. Now, if there is an error, what we'll do is we'll just log the error, and then we'll redirect the user back to the home page. Okay, that's what this redirect does. Okay, same thing that we did up here, and what we did in fetch mutual guilds. Okay, so let's go into get server side props now, and we're gonna go ahead and call fetch guild. So return fetch guild. Let's import that from the API file, and we're gonna just pass in the context. All right, so let's go ahead and refresh the page, and let's take a look at the logs. And it seems like everything is successful, but I'll show you the logs real quick. Let me just show you real quick. Okay, so look up top over here. This is where the Next.js logs are. The bottom here is for the API. So see how the headers are being logged, and you can see that we do have the cookie, and the cookie is present, right? So since the cookie is present, the call is going to go through. If the cookie was not present, it would redirect us back to the dashboard. Now, you can see that we fetched data successfully because you can see that the guild is actually being logged. We have the same exact data that is being logged in our Next app in the console compared to when we actually fetched it from visiting the actual address in the address bar. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to actually type annotate dashboard page. Okay, because we need to actually have it taken a prop. So type props, and the type is just going to be a guild. And then we're going to go ahead and take this props. And remember, we're going to type annotate next page with layout. But it's not going to let us do it immediately because we do need to actually update next page with layout to actually be generic. So let's do that real quick. So we're going to have to add T, so the generic T to next page with layout, as well as with next page. Okay, and then we're gonna have to also update the app props with layout as well, because right now you can see that's giving us an error. So we're gonna actually have to add T over here, okay, and T over here, and then that should allow us to fully have next page with layout be generic. Okay, and that's gonna allow us to just destructure guild just like that. Okay, now let me go ahead and just use a paragraph tag, and let's just render out the name. And you can see that GitHub gods is being rendered, and that's good, but we need to actually get that data to render out on the app bar, and we need the icon to be rendered out on the sidebar. Okay, so that leads us to the next step. Okay, so for next step, what we want to do is we want to actually use context to kind of lift up the state. So that way the dashboard layout, right, which is this component over here, can actually consume that context and get the actual fetched data. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a context. So I'll go inside utils and I'll create a new folder called contexts, because we might have multiple contexts later. And I'll just create a guild context.tsx file. Okay, and then all we're going to do is we'll just create a simple context. So export const guild context equals create context. Okay, now we are going to need to pass in an empty object for this right now, but we're going to actually also type annotate this context. So let me go ahead and create a custom type called guild context type. And then we're going to have the type have a property, which is going to be a guild. Okay, and then we're also going to have the set guild function. So most contexts, if the context needs to be updated, it's going to have the property and then the function that's going to update that property. Okay, so we're going to type annotate guild context type. And the reason why I am actually setting this guild property to be optional is because we don't know if the context will actually have this property be defined yet, right? Because we will need to actually update the context in order for the value to be defined. So we don't know if it's going to be present yet. So that's why we are going to set it to be optional, or not optional, but it'll be a type of guild or undefined. Okay, but we're going to actually have to pass in set guild and pass in a fake implementation for the default value, and it's just going to be a function that has an empty body. It doesn't return anything, doesn't do anything. Okay, if I didn't have this question mark for after the guild, I would actually have to define the guild and all its properties, which we don't want to do that. It's better to just set it to be undefined, or possibly undefined, I should say. Okay, so now that we've created the context, what's next? Well, we actually have to go into the roots of our next app, and that's just going to be this underscore app.tsx file. And we need to import the context, and we need to wrap our component, or not component, but our get layout, right? Not the component, but the get layout, because remember, this has the actual layout, and we need to have this layout with the actual with the actual context as well. Um, so I forgot we have one error over here. Let's see. Not sure why this is throwing an error, to be honest with you. But I'm just gonna leave this as I'll just leave it as any for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and import the guild context, and we're going to reference .provider, and we're literally just going to call get layout in between guild context.provider. But obviously we have to wrap it in between curly braces, right? Because we are calling a function. And then we're going to define some state. So let's do that up here. So const guild set guild equals use state, and the type will be guild, and it's going to be undefined. And we're going to go ahead and pass in the value. So guild, and then set guild. Okay, so it's similar to how we use context regularly in just a regular create React app application. Now, if I go into the layouts component, so let's go to layouts dashboard. Okay, I can actually consume the context, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. Though the value is going to be undefined because, or not, yeah, it's going to be undefined because we haven't actually updated the context yet. Okay, so we actually need to update the context before we actually are able to access any of the properties, because right now, right, we're only consuming it, but we haven't updated, we haven't like set the guild yet. So let's actually go ahead and update the context. So we're going to update the context inside our dashboard page because that's where we have the actual guild. Okay, and keep in mind that, remember, we are using context, so state is going to be lifted up. So you can think of it as like global state, where all of our components will have access to it. So what I can do is I can go to the index.tsx file for the dashboard folder, right? So inside dashboard ID index.tsx. And what I can do is I can just go ahead and call set guild, but I'll do that inside a useEffect hook. And I'll log the guild, and I'll just go ahead and call useEffect, or not useEffect, use context, pass in the guild context. And just to note that all of these are being imported automatically for me up here, so make sure you import them as well. Okay, so make sure you import use context as well as useEffect, and then guild context as well. And I'm going to go ahead and get the set guild function. Remember, this is the function that's going to update the actual state. Okay, so we're going to call set guild, pass in guild. And what actually happens is we actually are calling, in the end, we're actually calling this set guild update a state updater function, right? Because remember, this is being passed into the provider. So the provider will use this function for all of the components that actually consume the context. Okay, so when we're actually calling set guild, it's actually going to call this function, which is going to update the state for us. Okay, so when we update guild now, it's going to go ahead and update this guild state over here that's defined at the root app component, right? And now update for every single component that consumes the context. Okay, so if we go back to the dashboard layout, guild should now actually be defined when we fetch the page, and I'll show you real quick. I'll show you. So let's go over to right over here, and I'll just do guild !name, and if I refresh the page, you're going to see that GitHub Gods is going to be displayed right over here. Okay, so we have it displayed on the dashboard and right over here, which is underneath the app bar. Okay, now notice how if I go into the dashboard page right now, if I remove that set guild, and if I refresh, you're going to see that it disappears, right? Because right now I am not setting the guild, and guild.name, guild is undefined. So name is not going to actually be evaluated. Okay, it's not going to be rendered out. Okay, so that's what's happening with context, right? We are updating the context, and since guild is not defined, it's going to be rendered. Okay, so the next thing that we'll do is we're just going to have to pass in the guild as a prop to sidebar and app bar. So let's go over to sidebar, and let's go ahead and create a props. And it's just going to take in a guild, and it could be undefined, so I will put a question mark. And I'm going to type annotate sidebar as an FC, which is a generic type, and I'll pass some props. And this will just allow me to just destructure guild easily. You can also destructure the children prop if you need it. Okay. And now I can go ahead and on the sidebar, I can render out the actual guild icon. So what I can do is I can reference the guild.icon property in order to actually do that. But before I do that, let me actually do this real quick. Let me actually create a helper function. So let me go inside helpers.ts, and I'll create a function called getIcon. And what we're going to do is if there's no guild, we'll return a default icon. For now, I'm just going to return me.png, which is just a picture of myself. Because if there's no icon, we just want to render like a default icon. For you, you can just render like the default Discord icon, right? Because there are situations where the guild will not have an icon, right? So actually, let me do this. If there's no guild or there's no guild.icon, let's do that. Okay, we'll return the default icon. However, if there is an icon, we'll just return this hard-coded URL, which I'm just going to copy and paste. So it's just going to be the Discord apps CDN, okay, and then the /icons/ and then you have to pass in the guild ID, and then the guild icon. So that's the hash, okay, and then .png. Okay, now I can actually tie this up with a ternary operator. So let me see if there's no guild or no guild.icon. Yeah, let's just use a ternary operator. And even better yet, we could just do this. And obviously, what you could do is you could just, define this base URL in a variable and then tie this up, but it's okay. And just also, if you haven't already, make sure you go to your next.config.js and make sure you have configured the CDN. Okay. Otherwise, it's not going to allow you to load the icon from this external URL. So let's go to our sidebar again. So right over here for source, we're going to go ahead and call it getIcon. We're going to pass in guild. Now it's saying argument of type guild is undefined. You know what? Let me do this. There we go. All right, so now let's go to our dashboard. Let's refresh. Not sure why that happened. Let's go to the menu page. Something, maybe we may have gotten a rate limit, but hopefully not. Okay, so we're on GitHub Gods, but let's see what's going on. It's not rendering out the guild, the actual correct guild icon for us, which is not good. Oh wow, I just realized that I completely forgot to actually pass in the prop. I forgot that we made this optional, so no wonder why that didn't work. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna do this guild equals guild. Now it's gonna give me that issue. Yeah, let me just do that instead. Okay, there we go. Now it should actually give us the correct icon. Okay, I'm on a different guild right now, but you can see that it says music hangout. But if I go back to GitHub Gods, it will just render that icon for me. Okay. Cool. So the way that we have this set up. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Whoa, what am I doing? This is the types for React. There we go. So the way that we have this set up is that we're gonna go ahead and render the icon, and if there's no icon for the guild, like let's say for example, if the guild does not have an icon, right, we'll just return a default icon. You can put whatever default icon you want. Okay, now let's go ahead and do one last thing, which is just passing the guild as a prop for the app bar. And then we'll just do the same thing that we did for sidebar, where we type annotate the app bar with props. And that's just going to include the guild. Okay, let's just destructure guild. And let's go over here. Let's just make this optional because it could be undefined, right? And what we'll do is instead of having this hard-coded name, we'll just do guild.name. And you can see it says GitHub gods. Let's go to the menu. Let's go to the Audi server. It's going to go and show Audi server. Okay, and now keep in mind that we do have to actually make sure we set the state or set the context state on all the pages, right? Because we're only doing it on the dashboard page, right? Which is kind of the downside because we are using server-side rendering as well, alongside with some client-side rendering to actually get this to work, right? So right now I'm on the dashboard page, right? But if I go to the commands page, you're gonna notice that let me just do this real quick. Let me go to /commands and look at what happens if I go to /commands. It's gonna show. It's not gonna even show the name, and it's not gonna show the correct icon. Okay, so if you want this to work, you need to make sure that you set the state of the context, which requires you to fetch the actual guild whenever you visit the page. And this actually is, it's not really a bad thing because it allows your users to actually just visit the exact URL, and then they'll have all the data populated. So they don't have to go through and click on the menu page and or go to the menu page and then click on the guild every single time to get to the correct page. Okay, so just make sure you do the same thing that you did inside the index.tsx file, which is just a dashboard page, for all the other pages. So for the commands page, for the settings page, and any other page that you have. So that's going to be pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out.